Ladies and gentlemen, boa noite. My name is Evelyn Welsh, and I'm the Vice Principal for Arts and Sciences here at King's College London, and it's my privilege and pleasure to welcome you to this evening's event. We're extremely lucky that tonight's speaker, Ambassador Celso Amorim, will be a distinguished visiting professor at the Brazil Institute for the next 2 weeks. An honour that seems particularly appropriate given that this is the 5th anniversary year of the Brazil Institute on many successful occasions. The lecture this evening on constructing multipolarity is the first in a series that the Ambassador will give at King's. This coming Wednesday, for example, the Ambassador will lecture on the recent Iran nuclear deal in the Department of War Studies, and on the 11th of November, he will give the keynote address at a conference on defense and security institutes in issues co-organized by the Brazil Institute and the International Institute of Strategic Studies. Ambassador Celso Amorim, who was born in Santos in the state of São Paulo, is only one of 5 Brazilians who have served their country as foreign minister on 2 separate occasions. In the ambassador's case, this was from 1993 to 1995, under President Franco, and from 2003 to 2010 under President Lula da Silva. The ambassador also has the distinction of being the longest-serving foreign minister in Brazil's Republican history, serving for 9 years and 6 months, slightly longer than the most famous diplomat in Brazil's history, the Baron of Rio Branco. And he followed this up, that is, Ambassador Amorim, rather than the Baron of Rio Branco, by serving as defense minister from 2011 to 2015. In English, we'd say he's a sucker for punishment. But it is not just his time in office that makes Ambassador Amorim stand out. The impact that he was able to make in government is truly remarkable. In 2009, a writer for Foreign Policy magazine, David Rothkopf, called him, and I quote, the world's best foreign minister. So for the other foreign ministers in this room, there's a lot to live up to. Under his leadership, Brazilian diplomacy was particularly active and energetic, and this makes the ambassador uniquely qualified to speak about tonight's topic, since he did so much to shape the contemporary multipolar world. It was from 2003 to 2010, for example, that Brazil emphasized the global fight against hunger and poverty. And it was during this period also that Brazil helped to create new multilateral coalitions, including the G20, which lobbied against the subsidies to protection of agriculture in Europe and the United States, the G4, the IBSA, the India, Brazil, and South African grouping, and of course the famous BRICS with their regular summits and new development bank. And the trajectory of Ambassador Amorim's career shows that his activism as foreign minister was not an accident, but the fruit of a lifetime of engagement with some of the world's most intractable problems then. And for example, from 1999 to 2001, Ambassador Amorim was in charge of the permanent mission of Brazil to the UN in Geneva, where he continued to work on major international issues, including international trade. And he followed up his role in helping to create the World Trade Organization by participating in the initial rounds of the Doha trade negotiations during this period. Now, Ambassador Amorim is no stranger to London. He was a diplomat at the Brazilian embassy here when he studied with Ralph Miliband at the LSE from 1968 to 1971. He returned as Brazilian ambassador to Great Britain in 2001 and served here until becoming foreign minister in 2003. And it's a particularly auspicious time to welcome him back to London and to King's, as British and Brazilian diplomats work together to develop common positions at the upcoming UN Climate Change Conference, scheduled to take place in Paris from the 30th of November to the 11th of December. And in this context, it's important to emphasize that the ambassador has not only contributed to the reshaping of post-Cold War world, he's also made an important scholarly contributions to our understanding of the world. After graduating from the Rio Branco Institute, the Academy for Brazilian Diplomats in 1965, he later taught there. He's also been a professor of political science and international relations at the University of Brasilia, one of King's partner universities in Brazil, and he is a permanent member of the Foreign Affairs Department of the Institute of Advanced Studies at the University of São Paulo, another of King's partners in Brazil. And he has numerous publications, including 3 important books, Conversations with Young Diplomats from 2011, Brief Diplomatic Narratives in 2013, and Tehran, Ramallah, and Doha 2015. And he's received an honorary doctorate from the State University of Paraíba and has been awarded more than 15 Brazilian and foreign medals and decorations. Now, I'm an art historian, so I particularly like this bit. There's another side of Ambassador Amorim's professional life that deserves mention, and that is his love of cinema. From 1979 to 1982, he served as head of Embrafilme, the federal agency that supports Brazilian movie making. He's evidently passed this love of cinema to his family because 3 of his 4 children work in the film industry. He is also a media performer himself, and you can hear him, if tonight is only just a warm-up, on BBC News Hard Talk on the 12th of November. So we are very grateful to Ambassador Amorim for coming to King's to share his experience and knowledge with him. And I need to apologize, as I've done to him and to the audience. He will understand that in my position I now have to run and give another introductory to another lecture elsewhere within the King's community. But I want to give him a very warm welcome on all your behalf and say how much we are grateful for him for coming to King's, for contributing his knowledge, and for presenting this lecture on constructing multipolarity, the Brazilian perspective. Obrigada.
Oh. It's me? Oh, yeah. Well, thank you all. I want to thank the words of Reverend Walsh, although she had to leave. And of course, I want to thank King's College, and President Antonio Pereira and Vinicius. I want to thank the ambassador and our colleagues who are here, and other colleagues that I had along the career who also came here. I will start with something that Evelyn said when this piece was written in the Foreign Policy magazine, that I was the world's best foreign minister, it was called. It was when Brazil got the Olympics, many things. Most of them I had nothing to do with them, but they put it all together and they considered that I was and they know it was David Rothkopf, whom I didn't know at the time. I had not met him, so it's no personal influence whatsoever. Had said that I was the world's best foreign minister in a moment of, he's a very lucid man, but at that time he was not. And he wrote that. And some months later, I gave an interview to a Brazilian newspaper, very important Brazilian newspaper. It was a long interview. It was a very, very good journalist, actually, whom I after met in Harvard. He was studying in Harvard. So he was a very good journalist. And he made many questions, and the publishing was very faithful to what I said. The only thing that they didn't put was one question, and that he made to me, and which I replied the way I will say. He said, why do you think that you were considered by foreign policy? It was not foreign policy, it was one person, but anyway, why were you considered the world's best foreign policy, the world's best foreign minister? And I said, well, they are misinformed, they don't read your paper. So, and I could have said, they don't read the Brazilian media. And that particular question was not reproduced in the interview. But apart from that, I say that because it has some interest, because my books were mentioned. I'm not going to make much of publicity of my books because they're all in Portuguese anyway, unfortunately. But you see, especially in the last one, which is called Tehran, because of what we did in relation to the negotiations, to the object of another lecture, I believe, that I can mention today briefly. Ramallah, because of our positions in the Middle East, and Doha. Doha, it's a coincidence, there are 3 capitals of the Middle East, but Doha was really about the Doha round, which maybe it's the biggest frustration I carry. But anyway, So in this book, you'll find that there are very important characters. Unfortunately, myself, I am one of them because I write, so I have to write from my point of view. But President Lula is a very important. Other people with whom I have to deal with, for instance, in the question of the Doha Round, Peter Mandelson is a very important character. Pascal Lamy is a very important character, and other people are also important characters in other parts of the book. But probably, apart from these people, the most important character in the book is the Brazilian media, because it was a constant fight. Not that I appreciate very much, because I am very fond of the famous Voltaire's saying that I don't agree with anything you say, but I will defend until my death all your right of saying that. So I firm defender of free press, whatever happens. But I have to say that it was, and I was here, one of my press advisors is here, and Lillian, and it was a constant battle. It was a daily battle. I can give you one example from the Doha round. I mean, just to mention en passant, those who are familiar with the trade negotiations in the past now know that in the old GATT, everything it's a concentric circles for decision, as in many other places. But in old times, it was called the Quad, and it was composed of the European communities there. It was not still the European Union, United States, Canada, and Japan. And it stayed like that during the first phases of the WTO. And after a meeting which is described in some detail in another book of mine, it's Cancun, we created a G20, which was not the G20, the famous G20 of the leaders, but another G20 of developing countries which were fighting for the trade negotiations. And as a result of all that, a new Quad was formed. And the new Quad was United States, as always, European Union, as always, Brazil and India. China was still going slowly in the WTO because it was a new member. And once I had a meeting with them, the first meeting we had in this format was in Paris, just after Pascal Lamy had been elected to be the Director General of the WTO. And I met, and there was a meeting of the four, which was programmed for a certain day. On the eve of that day, both the American and the European Union commissioners wished to meet me, because they wished to meet Brazil, of course, and because I was maybe more experienced. I had been already in previous negotiations. And Pascal Lamy also wished to meet me, so I decided that the Indian guy was okay. He just met me during the meeting of the four. The American and European were even, I had complaints that I was giving more time to the European than to the American and things like that. And in the end, we find time for the three of them, for the two of them, and I had dinner also. And I said, well, I can do that, but I don't have time to go around, so everything has to take place in the Brazilian embassy, the residence of the Brazilian ambassador, and the ambassadors know the symbolism of these things. So it happened. It was all in the Brazilian embassy, and I met, I think first was the American, then Peter Mandelson. Actually, it was the first meeting of Peter Mandelson of Pascal Lamy after he had been elected. But Pascal Lamy had been the European Commissioner, so they met at my door like that. And then, following day, the headline of the Brazilian paper, why did I choose to dine with the weakest of them? So you can see that there's no point, because of course Pascal Lamy didn't represent the big country. So this is how things are. So we have this battle in the media all the time. So when something, another episode I have, I just mentioned that in passant because it's the plight of every politician, but I think in Brazil it's a bit worse. I remember Durão Barroso going to Brazil and saying that there were two different countries. The country that he was seeing, the people that he was talking to, it was one country, and what was on the paper was another country. I mean, unfortunately now we are having many problems, but even so, the media very often multiply them. Anyway, But the episode I was going to mention very quickly was I usually went to the Senate, to the lower house as well, but in Brazil the Senate keeps more busy with foreign policy, and about a certain subject, I don't even remember very well what it was, I decided to read the headlines of the foreign papers and the Brazilian papers. And of course the foreign papers were all positive or relatively positive, and the Brazilian papers were all negative. So the headline following day was Amorim attacks against the Brazilian media. So there is no way of dealing with this thing. That's natural and you're happy. But I have to say, in spite of everything, it's better to have it free and attacking you than not to have it. We have lived 21 years of military government, so I can certainly say that for sure. Well, it's an honor for me to be here in King's. It's an honor to speak to this group of students, and I will, on a very general way, speak about the most important aspects, I think, in which Brazil have been involved. Let me start to speak about two aspects, because they came very strongly to me recently. And these are two very important points that have to do on how to deal with multipolarity, what it is and what it should help. I have been to two places recently for different reasons, Palestine and Haiti. Palestine, I just went there to collect the decoration President Abbas gave me. And in Haiti, I am the head of the OAS, Organization of American States, observers of the election. And I think these two places are very symbolic of the problems of our world today, which are intolerance and inequality. And if I would have to single out the two most important problems that we have in our world, I would single out these two. Maybe further thought we could think different things, but somehow they are linked to these two questions. Inequality, of course, is very important. Not only the inequality inside nations, but the inequality among nations. And when you take the government I will have the honor to serve, President Lula, and also Dilma in this respect, but of course Lula started it, probably our main achievement, I mean our, collectively is a presumption of mine, but anyway, the government's main achievement was probably the reduction of inequality. And I think this is clearly perceived in Brazil, and you can perceive because you have people with different accents, with different colors, and different ways. For instance, in university, which would not be true 20, 30 years ago, or would be much more limited. So this has been a big effort and of great importance. And I think this effort also had an impact in foreign policy, not only because inequality became a theme for explicitly a theme in initiatives like the combating hunger and poverty, the initiative that President Lula took with other heads of government and heads of state, but also important because when we think about Brazil, and for a person like me who was born in 1942, who came to age in the late 50s, early 60s, who saw democracy blooming with all the contradictions and the problems that democracy always had, that then suddenly had a coup d'etat and had to live 21 years in different stages, because Brazil, the dictatorship was not all the time that violent. But during a certain time was, and in any case you could not choose your president, you could not choose your rulers. So for someone like me, the first big problem that we had to overcome was the authoritarian regime. So this was one of our ministers used to not in respect to this question, but you use the word mortgages. We have mortgages to how do you say that, to rescue mortgage, or what do you do with the mortgage? I don't know, when you can pay it. So we have to rescue 3 mortgages. One was of the authoritarianism. The second one was the economic instability, which later on was done, started in the government of President Franco, but continued with Cardoso, and of course Cardoso was already finance minister in the Franco government, had a big role in that. And the third, I think, the biggest one and the most difficult one, which only began, is inequality. I mean, Brazil, as most of Latin America, in fact, is very unequal. And this is probably the biggest problem that we have to face. And it's unequal from the regional point of view, it's unequal from the social point of view, and this is one of the biggest things. So, inequality became very important also because the fact that we are at least, I would not say starting, because other governments have done something as well, but starting to do it very seriously and in a very determined way, also helped us to have, let us say, a bolder foreign policy in a way. I mean, we didn't have this glass roof that could be on which everyone could throw stones all the time. Even if they could, they would say, "Oh, well, what we're doing." Actually, Brazil has always had a very open, not always, but since it became democratic, very open policy in relation to the Human Rights Commission and now the Human Rights Council. I mean, everyone goes to Brazil. Of course, we have many problems, but they are there. They go there. They mention what we have in terms of conditions of prisons, racial relations. Reports are not always nice to us, but I think this is a way to make progress. But this was a big thing about inequality. We're saying, well, we're doing things, we're working. So this was indeed a very important aspect. And I mentioned this in relation to my recent activities because I've been recently to Haiti. And Haiti is probably, if not one of the most unequal countries in the world. It's not only a poor country because you have rich people. Most of them don't live most of the time in Haiti, but they still have their house in Haiti. But it's incredibly unequal. And that, of course, reflects on other aspects of life, in economy, and in social relations, and so on. But also, Haiti is a testimony to the ineffectiveness of international cooperation to a large extent. I mean, we spent a lot of money, I would say, governments, NGOs, and were unable somehow to make structural projects. I mean, once I heard from an Haitian minister, a lady minister, and I think it was a very good observation. It said, you have to think of Haiti as a country, not a collection of projects. And indeed, most of the time, most of us who are in government or who are heading NGOs and so on, we were thinking about a project, how we do that. For instance, we had a project that had even a prize together with India and South Africa, which was the collection of solid residues, because it was very useful because it had several aspects. It would employ people to start with, which were unemployed. It would remove garbage from the streets, which was still a big, it still is, but not at the same scale, a big problem in Haiti. And at the same time, that was used as a source of energy. The theory worked better than the practice, but anyway, it was very good. It got a prize from the UNDP and so on. But you know, you had projects like that which were useful, which improved the life of some people. Fine, but we didn't have structural changes. And Haiti continues to be very dependent on foreign aid and so on and so forth. And it's not their fault. I mean, maybe to some extent, but it's to a large extent the fact that we as international organizations we're not able to develop something that will bear fruit for the long run. At least I don't see it yet. Maybe it will change. And that reflects in everything, including in politics. I mean, I now have to observe this election. They had 54 candidates for president. and the ballot was something like this big. That ballot, because they had several votings at the same time, but that ballot was something this big that you had to identify the photo or the symbol of your candidate, because many people are still illiterate, of course, and to make a cross there. So, not a simple thing. I mean, just for curiosity, I came from there, so I'm bound to speak about that. Each party has the right to have what they call a mandataire, which is a kind of surveyor or fiscal for each section. So it means there are 13,000 sections elected. So it means that for the first round of the election, which unfortunately was not yet there, there were actually more mandataires than voters. It were very near the number of. So actually, people who voted were the mandataires, after all. In the second, it improved a little bit because the rate of voting improved from very low 18% to 30%, which is still incredibly low. But anyway, so these things just showing that very often we speak about democracy separated from the social conditions or from economic conditions, and I think this Haiti symbolizes that. And I think it's a very creative country, it's a very creative people. I mean, in French galleries, I mean, naive painting by some Haiti painters cost quite a lot. Probably they get from $1 and they sell for 1,000. Not speaking about the French, anyone. But anyway, so this is one aspect. And that the inequality generates violence, generates doubts on people whether they should or not go to the voting station. For instance, the poorest places in Port-au-Prince were not able to vote in the first round. In the second round, it changed because we gave more attention to this aspect. Anyway, so this one. Let me speak about intolerance also. Intolerance is what you see in Palestine and Israel. And I've been there several times. When I went there the first time was 2004. In this period, I had been before briefly to the border between Israel and Jordan. But the first time 2004, and I've been there more or less regularly, 5 to 6 times, both in Jerusalem, Tel Aviv, and Ramallah. And I have the impression, a solid impression, that the situation is today worse than it used to be 10 years ago. So when people, and you had, so it was, hardliner as it was possible to talk to Sharon and to other people, his successor over, the foreign minister or his successor that evening. We could talk to them and try to work on the only possible solution, which is the two-state solution, which is, it's paradox because it's the only possible solution, but if you look at it, it's getting further and further away because, and then it's not so much of, I'm not been to Gaza, and so where I went this time, the West Bank, it's not so much the poverty that shocks you. Most people are reasonably dressed. You don't see houses in shambles or things like that. But it's the humiliation. The humiliation of not being able to go pray in some places, or not, if you have to have your children in school, let's say 2 kilometers from house, or even less than that, you have to make incredible turns to arrive there. And when you think about that, and you have a situation, for instance, when the Oslo agreements were signed, there were 60,000, more or less, settlers in what corresponds to West Bank and East Jerusalem. Now you have between 600 and 700,000. So that's after the peace process. And this is an essential aspect of the peace process. So unfortunately, I see the only solution getting more and more difficult to get it. And I say really unfortunately, because as a minister, I've, as I said, been to the region several times and always had very good dialogue with the two sides. Brazil was invited, for instance, for those who studied the question, the famous Annapolis Conference, which was really a turning point in which you had an involvement of the international community in the best sense of the word, because it was really representative of many different views. And Brazil, India, and South Africa were the only non-predominantly Muslim countries of the developing world to be present there. We had some kind of friends of the quartet. And countries like those I mentioned and others, maybe Turkey and so on, could also have a positive role in trying to find solutions for that impossible problem. And I mention this, not because I'm Brazilian and I want to extol Brazil's role in the world. I read it in an article yesterday by Anne-Marie Slaughter, who used to work for Hillary Clinton. Of course, people like Noam Chomsky also have written about that and have mentioned Brazil as one of the countries, not only Brazil, the countries like Brazil, who could help in this in this kind of conflict. And I mention this because this already somehow brings us to the question of multipolarity in the present world. And I think a lot about that because I use a lot that word, and very often we use a lot of words that we don't know very well what they mean, especially when there are new words that you somehow are inventing. And very often I studied international relations here. I was preparing for, at the time I was preparing for a master, then it was transforming into a PhD with a different subject, and I never finished the PhD for bureaucratic reasons. But the master was in international relations, and I talked a lot about balance of power. So when we speak about multipolarity, are you just reinventing a word for balance of power? Well, yes and no. Yes and no. Because yes, in the sense that, again, we were trying to speak about an equilibrium of forces that somehow renders the world more peaceful, or at least less subject to hegemonies. In this sense, yes. On the other sense, in the present world, you don't have only nation states, which was really for which the balance of power was thought. Actually, I think the first essay was David Hume, wasn't it? The famous essay on the balance of power. Other people had used the concept without maybe making it explicit. So at that time was the nation state, the Westphalian world, and now we have a complex world in which there are many other things which are part of it: blocks, groups, associations, and nation states. So the multipolarity is something more complex to start with than purely the balance of power as it was originally conceived. The second point, which I have to maybe come back to that later, is that at least in present day, you can't think of multipolarity only sheer power terms. I think we live in a world in which, for good or for bad, there are norms, and you cannot, although they don't mean the same thing, and sometimes people make a confusion of these things, multipolarity has to coexist with multilateralism. In a very simple way, multipolarity would be, let us say, I don't know how to say that in English. Would be the multipolarity would be the world of being, and multilateralism is the world of how it should be. Sein und sollen in German, for those who study law, for instance, or have studied Kant. Anyway, multipolarity is more complex, but anyway, it involves also a complex world. And another aspect of the present day reality that explains a lot Brazilian foreign policy is our understanding that to a large extent, not only, but to a large extent, present day world is a world of blocks. The United States is a block in itself. China is a block in itself. European Union is a block, maybe not in itself, but for itself, I don't know, but it is a block. In the future, not too long of future, maybe India will be a block because of the number of people who live there, which is incredibly big. And Brazil is very big. Very big. People who have been there know for their own experience. But Brazil is not a block. So Brazil needs South America to be present in the world. And I believe, forgive me, the other South Americans, they need Brazil also to have their voice heard. And that is why, for such a long time, we fought for the unity of South America. We fought for the unity of South America when, for instance, I'm speaking of the times in which I had some participation, of course. We fought for them in the 90s, for instance, when they decided to create Mercosur. We fought, for instance, and also for the first time we launched the idea of ALCSA, not ALCA, but ALCSA, which would be a South American Free Trade Association. We fought for it when we thought that the negotiations in the Free Trade Association of the Americas, which include the United States and Canada, were not going into the right direction. And we fought for it when we first proposed, because it was an idea that, again, forgive me for being personal, that I myself and Durão Barroso had, when Durão Barroso was Foreign Minister of Portugal, of having a Mercosur European Union negotiation. And I tell you why we had the idea then, at least from our side, I think also from the European side. Just after Maastricht and so on, I believe it was after Maastricht, the United States was again trying to create its own fortress to face Fortress Europe. And the Uruguay round had just finished. We didn't think of having other rounds of negotiation. And if we were bound to have a kind of free trade association of the Americas, it seemed impossible not to have it at the time. At least you should have some balance. And the balance was with the European Union. So it was an idea which appeared in second half, or I believe second half, of 1994, when there was a meeting of the Rio Group, which is a loser kind of association of Latin American states, and the European Union. And we made a side meeting of Mercosur with the people of the Commission. The Commission didn't give much importance to Mercosur, of course, and the person they sent was the Commissioner for Development Cooperation. But anyway, very good man, Marin. Very good man, he worked with us, and Barroso was very interested and so on. And before the end of the year of the Itamar Franco's government, we signed the first memorandum of understanding between Mercosur and the European Union. Then we had a long negotiation, because it's one thing to think about things theoretically, the other thing is to put them in practice. And we evolved with the difficulties and so on. And even, I mean, if I can make a big jump, of course there were actions taken during the government of Cardoso as well, but if I can make a big jump, in 2004, we, Pascal Lamy was the European Commissioner, we came to a design that was conceptually acceptable for both parties. But in trade negotiations, people know that very well, agreeing conceptually, of course, is essential, but not sufficient. You have to agree on numbers. There is very concrete things, tons of beef, quantities of cars, or tariffs, precise tariffs for cars. And when we moved from concepts to specifics, the difficulties appeared. And curiously enough, the Brazilian industry, which has criticized our government very much for despising the bilateral agreements, were very much scared that they would have to make too many concessions and not get what they want. Not so much what the industry wanted, but what agriculture wanted. In Brazil, like other countries, the interests are very linked somehow, because when you look for the people who you have ethanol to start with, it's a bit agriculture, a bit industry. You have the people who produce agricultural machinery, who are also of course, very much linked to agriculture and so on. But anyway, then it was impossible. I always thought it was an alternative, should be an alternative. So I just say that very briefly, because for those who are not Brazilians, or for those who are Brazilians but live abroad and read the Brazilian papers, and it is inevitable, of course, they may misread a little bit the history. It's not true that the government was not interested in a negotiation with the European Union. The government was interested. It was difficult negotiations, and just today I read again a declaration by a minister saying, well, it's on their side now, they have to make an offer that is attractive and so on. It's very, very difficult, because you're dealing with the very sensitive things, because things that were not sensitive were already liberalized a long time ago. So it's very difficult. It is important, I think, maybe it became even more important with the Trans-Pacific Partnership of the United States, But it's not a simple thing. And so it was not only Brazil who gave more emphasis to the multilateral negotiations, it was the world. We had, I don't want to go into that now because it's too long and too complicated, and probably everyone would be sleeping before I finish. But anyway, in the negotiations of the Free Trade Association of the Americas, we arrived at some point, but we could not agree on two fundamental points. I mean, on the case of Brazil, the difficulties were mainly with the question of dispute settlement on intellectual property. Not intellectual property as such, because I have three sons who are quite filmmakers. They are very interested in intellectual property, of course, and many other Brazilians are, of course. But it's the dispute settlement on intellectual property which we don't agree. We prefer to continue going to the WTO, and the United States prefer to have a dispute settlement limit to the Americas, in which they would have much more influence, of course, and we thought, no, it won't work that way. And on their side, they were not prepared to make concessions on agriculture. I don't want to go there very deeply, but that was basically what was there. And when I had, I was at that point, the Brazilian media criticizing all the time, saying, well, they are despising the American market, going to Africa and to the Arab countries, you know, this is purely ideology, as if it were ideology to talk to some right-wing king in the Arab Peninsula. I don't know how ideological that can be, but that was the way it was seen. Anyway, it's purely ideology and so on, and the same applied to Africa. And one day I was in Buenos Aires. I got a call from Bob Zelli, a very capable man, very blunt but very capable, and he called me, and I thought, oh my God, to come to this FTA again. And I was not preoccupied with Zelli, but I was preoccupied with how I would have to face the Brazilian press after, because I was very transparent. I spoke quite a lot to the press. I mean, much more maybe than I should. I don't. So I was a bit worried that Zelli will come back with his FTA thing, and there's nothing that we actually can do. And he called me. He spent about 1 minute on the FTA, probably because I think it was part of the script, and spent 1 hour, or half an hour to 1 hour, speaking about the WTO and how we should organize the WTO again, because after the Cancun debacle, some few countries could take, and that's the origin of the famous G4 that I mentioned before. How we started with a small group and how we did it. I don't want to go into WTO now because it would be a subject of a single talk, but I think it's the greatest frustration I carry, because I think these would have been really important for the world, important for Brazil, I'm sure, but also important for developing countries in general. And I remember when I was still a very young man, probably as young as anyone here, when we used to say, not trade, not aid. It was the motto for developing countries. And the WTO gave that opportunity, opening markets for small countries, poor countries, medium countries, and also for rich countries. It was a very complicated architecture, of course, because it involved things from, there is a name for that, denominations of origin. There is a special name for that, which I forgot. Huh? Sorry? Yeah, anyway. Geographical indications is the official name of the WTO. Geographic indications, there were on one side, and there was services, or in the other side, information services, and there was, of course, in the middle, the very hard questions of manufactured goods and agriculture. So it was tough, difficult negotiations. Countries of incomes like Haiti, or even smaller, like the less developed, like Guinea-Bissau. Guinea-Bissau was not in the negotiation, but anyway, some less developed countries in Africa, and there were very, very rich countries. So it was a very complex architecture, and I can tell you, we were very near completing it. And I think, honestly, you know, I tell that because that's part of it's the interesting part, the only interesting part of my narrative on Doha. Probably the person I fought most in WTO, not on other questions, but on WTO, was Peter Mandels. But in the very end, of the crisis in 2008, when everything seemed to be lost, we were on the same side because we want to save the round. And we say we are prepared to make the sacrifices, we are prepared to accept what, of course I'm simplifying a little bit, but we are prepared to accept what the Director General is offering because I think that's what helps everybody. And other countries didn't follow the same line, including some very rich countries. Some are not so rich, but including very rich countries. So, and that was a big frustration because even if now we have a Brazilian Director General, and I hope the best for him, he was worked for me actually. He is a proof of one of my theories about renewal in the diplomatic service. When I appointed him as Under Secretary of State for Economic Affairs, he didn't have the corresponding rank. I think I didn't make a mistake. He became the Director General of the WTO. But anyway, he's an excellent man, and I think he'll do the best. But I think the best, even if he does what he thinks the best, is much less than what could have been done in 2008 had the countries shown a little bit of flexibility. And of course, there is always the wishful thinking, oh, we come back in 2 months' time, 3 months' time. I said, forget about it. In 2 months' time, we have another crisis. Maybe we had the energy crisis, we had the food crisis. I didn't know I was just making, in a way, a forecast about the financial crisis. And of course, attentions became focused somewhere else, and everybody forgot about the WTO, and I really regret it. But let me move to something else. I would say that the multipolarity is favorable for everyone, but it's very, I think even for the United States, when you see some of the writers saying that, well, we should be the primus inter pares, and they use another word which I don't remember now, maybe the main partner, but not the only one. So even them think that way, but certainly for us it would be better. And that we thought it was our responsibility not only to try to do the best for us, but also to help build multipolarity. And that's why we have initiatives like the creation of new groups, starting with the integration of South America. I won't dwell on that again, it will be another chapter. Integration of South America, going as far as we could, respecting the differences that existed already between countries. The ideal from Brazilian point of view, and I suppose from other countries' point of view, would be to have a unified customs union for the whole of South America, but we thought that would be impossible. So we tried to work on the basis of free trade agreements and building other cooperation in other areas. Even defense council was created in South America. It's still relatively weak if you compare with other things, but it's a start. And the military of the South American countries talk to one another, and that's a very important thing because it helps create confidence. We are doing some work in the integration of the industrial base for defense. I'm including some of my defense chapeau here. So that's how we work. But beyond South America, in the second day of government, when I received the visit of the foreign minister of South Africa. And she came with an idea which was positive, but was a bit complex to my mind, which was to create a group of developing countries that have been already, still exists, the G15, but which is not effective because it's too many countries, too many opinions. In the end, you just agree on generalities. So, she proposed something about 7 or 8 countries. I don't remember them, but anyway, I think Madam Minister, she's called Koza Zuma, she's now the chairperson of the African Union. And I asked her, let us do something simple. Let us think of 3 countries. Each one of them in one region of the developing world. The 3 of them are democracies and multicultural countries, India, Brazil, and South Africa. So that's how IPSA was born. The Indians later agreed, of course. And that's how IPSA was born. And I'll tell you one thing. Of course, BRICS is much more sexy and economically much more powerful because it has China, mainly. It has one country which is one of the biggest military powers, still Russia, and it has one country which is the 2nd GDP in the world, soon will be the 1st. So it's more sexy. But anyway, IPSA had this particular characteristic of being countries with greater affinity among themselves. I don't think the 2 groups contradict each other, but I think we should give emphasis to both. And unfortunately, from my point of view, and I'm not blaming anyone, these things happen, IPSA is now having less emphasis than it should have. During the period I was there, not because of me, but because of the leaders, the 3 leaders that were there, IPSA was there were, I believe, 4 or 5 meetings of the summit meetings, apart from 10 or 12, I don't know, 8 meetings of foreign ministers, and meetings in different levels. I mentioned, for instance, this group of cooperation in Haiti, which was of the 3 countries. There were cooperation agreements in relation to other countries, to Burundi, to Nepal. So this was very, very interesting. There are 3 countries with more affinity. I don't need to mention to those who are studying international relations, the 3 are candidates to be permanent members of the Security Council. 2 of them in a quite assumed way, the 3rd one less so because of the complexities of African politics. So we created IPSA. We created just moving quickly, we did a strong work for the summit between South American countries and Arab countries. This is the 2nd narrative of my book. It's the creation of ASPA, which allowed us, and probably one of the byproducts of this effort was the knowledge that we got from these different countries. It was something that was unthinkable before. The foreign minister, many of these countries have never been visited by a foreign minister. I visited a great number of them. I didn't visit Yemen, I believe. Maybe there's another one, I don't know, but it's very few indeed. So even the president went to some of them. So and of course we received these people in Brazil as well. So these are again created, and it's very interesting because 3 or 4 years later, the European Union in a way copied us and created a special meeting with the Arab countries. And I said, well, in this time we beat them, and we came first. And we had these agreements, which was very useful. I mean, even one minister, that he might be attracted to Brazil because it's big enough, or to Argentina, or to Chile because it has a big Palestinian community, but probably will ignore some other places. And they now have gone there. They have gone to other countries as well. So this was an effort. And we did the same thing with Africa, just summarizing. And for those who believe that this was purely ideological or philosophical, even if it's not in a detrimental sense, pejorative sense, our trade with the Arab countries in the years more or less 2003, 2004 to 2010 or 2011 and 12, which is the period that I compared more, with the Arab countries augmented fourfold, and with the African countries fivefold. And not to say that, well, it augmented fivefold because it came from 0, it's nothing. No, it's not true. Africa, if it would be considered as a country, of course, as an activist, and if you ignore that the European Union is a union, consider the countries individually, Africa would have been at the time that I made the calculations, that's more 4 or 5 years ago, would be our fourth partner. China, the United States, Argentina, Africa, and then Germany. So it's not insignificant. It's, even from those, I'm not a defender of that foreign relations are purely based on economic interest, but even for those who think that way, they should know better, I think. Anyway, so we did all these things, and I'm sure they help in the multilateral, in forming a multipolar world in a way with more variety of thinking, with more contacts. We didn't need to go to Washington or to Paris to meet someone from Cairo. The foreign minister from Egypt came to Brazil several times. I came to Egypt many times. And of course, as I said, I visited all other countries. And this created a situation in which we became an actor. I remember when we had a meeting of IPSA in Brazil, it was a very complicated day because we had multiple summits. But in the morning we had a breakfast of IPSA. The foreign minister of Palestine crossed all the world just to be part of that breakfast. So it was something that he thought important for his own country. So potentially it had a role, and I hope in the future will continue to have. And that didn't mean despising the rich countries either. I mean, Brazil was certainly the first country of Latin American Caribbean to have a strategic partnership with Europe. And we have a global dialogue with the United States. So one thing didn't contradict the other. I'm sure the contrary is true. It helped because it showed that we had a possibility acting in more countries. So in a way, making a little long story short, Brazil became part of the great game to some extent. And maybe the test for that, the biggest test, was the famous Tehran Declaration. I want to go in detail now. I just really want to say two things about that, the first of the three narratives. In the Tehran Declaration, I think Brazil showed one thing, which was it was possible. What everyone was saying, oh, it is useless to discuss with the Iranians, they will cheat you, they say one thing to you, the other thing to the Chinese, another thing to the Turks, and they know to whom they should write to, meaning the atomic agency in Vienna. That's what they did, actually. They wrote the atomic agency in Vienna, so we showed it was possible. And again, she allows me, I don't know her personally, Anne-Marie Slaughter, to quote her again, in 2012, more or less, 2 years after the Tehran Declaration had been refused by those who have originally proposed, because it was based on what had been proposed to us. Probably people thought we would not get it, and that would prove Tehran could not negotiate. I don't know what was the intention. That's a discussion. But anyway, 2 years after the Tehran Declaration, and 2 years after the sanctions that were adopted just 1 month later, the same Anne-Marie Slaughter, who had been the planning advisor to Hillary Clinton, wrote an article or gave an interview, I'm not sure, in the Financial Times, saying, well, and that was the time in which the pressure for bombing Iran was at the height, and in that article she said, well, maybe it's the time to revisit that agreement that the Brazilians and the Turks had proposed. So I'm not saying that influenced what happened, but you know, she detected something important, which was on the mind. It is possible to negotiate with the Iranians. It's not impossible. And actually, when Obama later on was saying, well, to his critics, well, let us rely and then see what happens. The Financial Times, again, to mention it, published a piece, an editorial, saying, trust and verify, which is actually, as everybody knows, the motto of disarmament. So what we trust it, but of course it should be verified. But we cannot deny before doing the things. So it was a very important action from our point of view, and I don't regret what we did. And I think it was useful. And another point that I mentioned, always when I have to make a comparison, at that time, if the agreement had been accepted by all, Iran would be left with about 1,000 kilograms of light enriched uranium. Now they have 12,000. Of course, I'm not denying the value of this agreement, and it's very good that it's there, but it's much more complicated, I suppose, to verify 12,000 than to verify 1,000. So maybe we lost some time. But anyway, it's an important thing. I mean, there are many other aspects in which we could go into the multipolarity. I gave you examples that have to do with multipolarity, have to do with our action in the great game. But one maybe more graphic example is the move from the G8 to G20. And I remember when I said that to a group of Brazilian journalists that G8 is dead. Actually, G8 is dead now for different reasons. It's a G7 again. The G8 doesn't exist. One might say, at the time I could not foresee that. But anyway, I said the G8 is dead. I was, of course, it was hyperbole. But anyway, some months later, President Obama said the G20 has become the primary group on financial economic matters. So, didn't say it's dead, but in a way, if it's not dead, it survives in a different way. It's a group, like other groups. And again, coming back to multipolarity, and blocks and groups, you have the G8, G7, G8, no, you have G7, and you have BRICS. People ask me, what do the BRICS have in common? I mean, they have in common not agreeing with the G7. And I think that's reason enough to me to see each other and to discuss solutions. So, this is the world we live in. In a world like that, in which, of course, unipolarity would be very detrimental. Multipolarity is important, but has to be completed by multilateralism. We still face a risk of a new bipolarity of a different kind. We're not sure about that, but many people say that. I think the role for diplomats and politicians who deal with foreign matters is a search for justice, which is a very abstract thing to say, but I think the mixture of multipolarity with multilateralism somehow helps in this idea of justice. Again, in Brazil, yeah, that's very different in a developed country, I think, in which a moral role in foreign policy is more or less accepted, even if people emphasize the national interest. In a developing country, say, well, how this helps Brazil? How this helps Brazil? And I said, well, I don't see, let me put it this way, I see generosity as self-interest in the long run. I mean, think for instance of our region, we have 10 neighbors. Only 2 countries have more neighbors than Brazil, China and Russia. And I don't believe any country with a similar number of neighbors hasn't had a war in its region for 150 years. Well, that demands a lot of doing, not only good diplomats like Rio Branco who solved the problems, but integration is more or less like a marriage. It's a commitment you have to renew every day. It's not just sign a book and then say it's done. No, we have problems with Paraguay because we have problems which are natural problems because they were partners of the, used to be the biggest electric dam in the world. What they received was not a fair share. I agree with that to some extent. I mean, not the way they wished, but anyway, to some extent we try to compensate that. You were ambassador in Paraguay, you know. Our ambassador here. It's a great Latin American. You signed the declaration.
No instruction.
Yeah. So I see that way. Generosity is self-interest in the long run to some extent. I should make maybe some comments between R2P, RWP, and non-indifference, which is a term I believe would be coined for hate and for other situations, but that would take us maybe too long. So I think the great challenge today is to have a system which is both multipolar and multilateral, and I think to avoid situations like Iraq and Libya, Syria, not a magic way, but maybe this could help. I think countries like Brazil, India, and South Africa, they will not solve the problem in the Middle East, but they can bring fresh air. I mean, if you have only Russia, the European Union, the European Commission, the United States Department, and the Secretariat of the United Nations, because it's not the United Nations. Today, not even the Quartet meets, but anyway. So I think these countries can bring fresh air, and there is a role for them in helping building a more just world, which will be multipolar and multilateral. Thank you.